Hello. If you're able to, please close your eyes. Take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. Relax your shoulders. Unclench your jaw. Take another deep breath in and another breath out. You can open your eyes now. My name is David, and welcome to Mindful Moments. How are you today? I hope you're well. I am very well, thank you. The sun is shining, it's a lovely day, and we are on episode 50 of this podcast. 50 episodes is no small feat. That's half a century, halfway to 100. When I started this podcast, before I started this podcast, I waited a long time to start it until I knew I was fully ready to do this consistently and do it properly. Though the consistency aspect hasn't been perfect because of life, because of all the things I've had to do, what I've done constantly throughout the process of making this podcast is learn. And the only reason I've been able to learn and the only reason I've been able to enjoy it so much is because of you. So from the bottom of my heart, an enormous, enormous thank you for being with me up until 50 episodes. May we have many more together. And I'm so grateful that you continue to listen to me, continue to create a space for me, and continue to talk back to me. I'm so glad we're in conversation. I'm so glad that we do this, and I will do it for as long as I'm wanted. So thank you so much. As is our tradition, we have a Q&A episode. Every 10th episode, there's a Q&A episode. This is episode 50, so it'll be no different. There's a Q&A episode. Thank you so much for leaving your comments on episode 48, on the YouTube video of episode 48. Fortunately, there weren't too many questions, so I think I'm actually going to answer them all. Usually I do 10 questions, but today I think I have 11, if I count correctly. So I'll do my best to answer them all well. And without further ado, episode 50, Q&A. Let's do it. Question 1. Hi, David. I really enjoyed this episode, and I consistently appreciate the content you put out. You're a big inspiration for me, and your mindful moments always make my days brighter. My question is about accepting praise while remaining humble. It's a balance I struggle to find for myself because it's been ingrained in me to see humility as akin to thinking less of myself. What is humility to you, and how can I practice it while accepting compliments and thinking highly of myself? How can I better draw the line between confidence and arrogance for myself? I know that's a lot of questions, but take it however you'd like. Wishing you well always. That's a wonderful question. Thanks so much for asking. Humility, true humility, is constantly knowing that you are no better than anybody else. That is the way I look at it. On a human level, we all matter just as much as the next person, no more, no less. When it comes to confidence and arrogance and where the line is between that, for me, true confidence comes from a place of not having to compare yourself to anyone else or put anyone else down to feel good within yourself. If I feel very good about myself, say, I'm good at writing. I know I'm good at writing. I know that I'm good at writing because I write frequently, and when I share my writing, it's well received by people whose opinions I respect. I don't think I'm good at writing because I think my writing is better than someone else's, and I don't read someone else's writing and immediately think they're better than me, they're worse than me. When I think of my own writing, just think of my own writing. And that's how I know I'm confident in my ability, because I don't need to compare it to anyone else's to see its merits. I think true confidence is when you believe in something you can do, you believe in yourself, and see the merits of what you're capable of doing without having to stack it up next to somebody else and make yourself feel like you're better than someone else to feel good about it. I think arrogance comes when you put others down, when you look at others as beneath you. That's when you kind of cross the line into arrogance. And we're all capable of being arrogant. We're all capable of being overconfident. We're all capable of all of those things, which is why it can be so hard, which is why when you're confident in yourself, immediately you can kind of get the feeling of, Am I doing too much? Am I looking down on other people? Am I thinking too highly of myself? To me, as long as you're not harming anybody else and your confidence is rooted in fact, it's confidence, not arrogance. It doesn't cross the line. And true humility is knowing, always knowing that, yeah, you are just as good as anyone else. Me being good at writing, for example, it's because I've had the time afforded to me. It's because I've had the practice to be good at writing. Anyone could be good at writing. I just happen to be because I put that time into it. If anyone else put that time into it and anybody else loved it like I do, they could be or they would be just as good as me. It just so happens that I've done those things. Does that make sense? I'm not better than anybody else, but I am good within myself. That is the line between confidence and arrogance to me. I think it's important that everyone has a healthy sense of ego, not overinflated, not I'm better than anyone else, but at the same time, I have value. I know I'm good at these things. And to be able to push on and do better at anything, we have to have that sense of belief in ourselves. We have to be able to accept compliments and have confidence in the things that we've done. I've gone as far as to literally write lists of things to build my own self-esteem so that I can accept compliments better and don't feel bad about thinking well of myself. Because if we don't think well of ourselves, we're not able to do the work that we need to on ourselves. And it kind of does a disservice to those who are giving us compliments and showing us respect. I still, to this day, I don't think many people are very happy with being overly praised and taking too many compliments. I sometimes find it difficult to even read the comments and reading the lovely things that people say to me. Sometimes it feels a little bit too much. But I know that if I don't accept those compliments, then I'm doing a disservice to the people who want to wish me well because they've taken their time to wish me well. So I should be open to that and I should embrace that. And if I ever feel like I'm overstepping the line or ever feel like I'm getting overconfident, use that as fuel to give back to those very people who have built me up. And that comes in the form of creating the things that people want me to create. And generally, if you're not me, comes in the form of continue to work on ourselves so we can continue to be just as good and better at the things that we should be confident in. Long-winded answer, but he did say answer however I want. So thanks. Question 2. David, your videos always seem to be strangely relevant to my life. I suppose in these dark and winter months, it's natural for us all to be thinking about change. In the same way the trees lose their leaves to make room for new ones, we too must accept that winter is the time of immense change. I loved your metaphor about carefully flipping the pages of our life. Recently, I've been thinking a lot about friendship, specifically about how we care for each other emotionally. Sometimes, however, when our friends are busy, we can't rely on them to be there for us all the time. I was wondering how you deal with times like these. I'd love to hear your thoughts in your Q&A video. When our friends can't be there for us, in my experience, the first thing that I always take it as is it's a test of resilience because you know the expression misery loves company? I used to not understand that when I was younger and I get it a lot more now. It's sometimes much better to go through things with friends and sometimes we need friends and just logistically people can't be there for us or show up for us in the ways that we want them to or as much as we like them to. In those times, it's truly a test of the infrastructures I've built within myself and how well I'm able to withstand difficulty without my friends. And it's always very illuminating. Sometimes I manage to stand on my own feet better than I imagined. And that's a big confidence boost because it's amazing. It means that I can rely on people if I need to. But if people can't be around, then I can rely on myself. And that's kind of the place I always try to sit in. I am quite an independent person generally. And I do like to think that even if people can't be there for me, I'd be able to at least keep myself afloat, if not still flourish. And then when I have the option to have people there for me, life gets even better. If that doesn't turn out to be the case, say I really need people there for me, no one happens to be there for me, and I really struggle, that gives a good indication of the things that I should be working on. It gives me a direction for the work I need to continue to do on myself. And it's also something that, I mean, this question shows a lot of emotional intelligence anyway. So I'm sure this is something you're already aware of. But when our friends can't be there for us, it can be very easy to kind of turn that on them and start seeing them as bad friends, etc. But Sometimes life just works out. As I said, logistically, we can't always be there for people as we'd want to. So it's also a chance for me to practice understanding and compassion and grace. If someone can't show up for me the way I need them to, my first instinct will be to wonder if they're okay and if, you know, to look at their circumstances. And I would always take a compassionate view on it first, not be upset with that friend, and then discuss it with them later. I'm not really very afraid at all to say to a friend, you know, when I really felt like I needed you there, I didn't feel like you were there, because that's how our friendships get stronger. I haven't had to do that in years, fortunately, but it is a conversation that I'm perfectly willing to have, because with our friends, it's important that we're honest. And those are the people who, if anybody, we should be able to express our true feelings with. So, yeah, if our friends aren't able to be there for us, it's a good chance for us to rely on ourselves and to kind of evaluate where we sit to see how capable we are of standing on our own 2 feet. And if we're not in that area at that time, to see what we should be working on, so that in case that kind of situation arises, we'll be able to look after ourselves a little bit better. It's not easy, but those times always pass, as everything does. Question 3. Hi, David. Welcome back. My question is, do you feel like these podcasts have helped improve your ability to verbally communicate effectively or to think with more clarity before communicating? Simple answer, absolutely. Talking effectively to myself, to you, but for the moment to myself, for an extended period every week or every other week, then going back and editing everything myself and looking at the things I say and listening to myself back has improved the way I speak and the way I think immeasurably. It's so funny. I was talking to a friend recently and we were talking about how so many of the things our parents tell us as children simply become more relevant as we go through life. One of the things I was always told, as I'm sure many of you were, was think before you speak. As an adult, and especially as someone who speaks often, I speak often in my work and for my job, and someone who's very excitable and very excited generally, I tend to speak very fast. I tend to think very fast. I tend to stumble over myself. I tend to rush. Doing this podcast and wanting to be heard and understood and wanting to be of value, wanting to deliver something that's of quality, I think very hard about my pace, about the things I'm going to say next. And when I edit back, I see the things I'm prone to doing, the mistakes I'm prone to making, and all of that has improved me massively as a speaker. If you listen regularly, you'll hear or you'll know that I take pauses quite often. And that's because I am very much thinking of the next thing I want to say. But that helps me to come up with a better formed sentence. And that's something that I've carried across into my real life. When I talk and when I'm asked questions, I tend to take very big pauses rather than use filler words, because I'm actually giving myself time to think. The more you think before you speak, the better the things you say will be. So simple. Literally been told since childhood. As an adult, I'm discovering it anew for myself. And that's something that this podcast has most definitely helped with. And something I'm very happy that I'm able to do. Something that we should all be able to do. I highly recommend. If your thoughts are moving too fast, you're worried about the way you're going to express yourself, take a beat, slow down. Even when you speak slowly, you're always faster to other people than you are to yourself. Sometimes I think I'm speaking really slowly, tortuously slowly. But to other people, it actually finally sounds like a normal pace. Even if you talk very slowly, people are listening. You have more time than you think. Slow down, deliver what you want to say in the way that you want to say it. Something I've very much learned and something that this podcast has helped a lot with. Question 4. Hello, David. My question is, how do you go about not living for the future? I feel like I'm in a phase in my life where I'm just waiting for the next chapter because my current phase in my life isn't ideal. I'm actually working pretty hard on my career/academics and health, so future me is able to be in a better place, but have a hard time actually enjoying the present, and I'm just letting myself go on autopilot. That's a really good question, especially given that so many of the topics that we talk about here are building towards our future selves and doing things for our future. And the work itself often isn't all that enjoyable. It can be, especially when you know you're working towards specific targets and goals, it can be really hard to enjoy the things that are happening in the present. what I'd recommend is knowing that, or taking on the understanding that you're not going to enjoy everything that's happening right now. And that's fine. You don't have to enjoy everything that's going on right now. So pick out and highlight and spend extra time underlining the things you do enjoy about the things that are going on right now. The majority of your energy is going towards your bigger goals and towards your future self. And the work you're doing in pursuit of that isn't necessarily enjoyable in nature. So though there's satisfaction at the end of it, the actual process itself isn't all that enjoyable, which is more than fine. Which means that other things in your life that are enjoyable, that exist concurrently to that work you're doing, become all the more important. There's nothing too small to be happy about. That's one of my biggest philosophies. So the tiny things that can make you happy, those small pockets of frequent happiness, your cup of tea in the morning, putting on a pair of warm socks, getting into fresh sheets in the evening, those small moments that help you to be present in the moment become all the more important when you're working towards bigger goals and the majority of your energy is going in a direction that takes a lot from you and isn't enjoyable in the moment. When you've done that hard work for yourself and you arrive at those goals, and hopefully in that place of happiness, it'll be easier to enjoy life globally, holistically. But for now, whilst you're thinking so much about the future, put a little bit of effort into enjoying small things on a day-to-day basis, just to make sure that your present isn't going to waste and that you are continuing to be happy right now as you deserve to. The version of you that exists right now deserves to be happy. The version in the future will be very happy because of all the work you're putting in, and keep putting that work in because it's a hard thing to do and it will reap all its rewards. But the version of yourself now deserves happiness too. So rather than everything making you happy, or the majority of your energy being the thing that makes you happy, just make sure you're checking in with yourself and taking those small moments to be present to make sure that on a day-to-day basis, you are getting those doses of happiness that you deserve. Question 5. Hi, David. Thank you so much for your kind and inspirational podcast episodes. They bring me so much joy. My question is, how do you prioritize yourself in all aspects of your life, such as being able to manage your romantic and work life whilst always thinking of yourself at the forefront of every decision? I'm currently trying to move away from people-pleasing tendencies, and any advice would be greatly appreciated. Thank you. Moving away from people-pleasing tendencies. Do you know what? That's a whole episode in itself. So I will do an episode on that in future, because that is a journey, a journey I've been on, a journey I'm still on in some respects. And it's difficult, but ultimately very worth it. The biggest lesson that I've learned when it comes to people pleasing and when it comes to putting myself first is that in the right relationships and in the right places, putting myself first benefits everybody. When I take care of myself, when I'm the best version of myself, is when I'm able to be at my best for others. In taking care of myself, I will ultimately take care of others because I'll be in a good place emotionally, mentally, physically, and able to be there and provide what others need from me in my friendships, in my relationships. If I don't take care of myself and I spend all my time taking care of other people or put other people first all the time, eventually I will empty all the positive things about me. I'll pour and pour and pour until I'm pouring from an empty vessel. And when there's an empty vessel, there's nothing for you and there's nothing for anybody else. You can't pour from an empty vessel. You have to keep pouring back into yourself in order to be able to give back to others. If you are someone who people pleases constantly and doesn't know how to put yourself first, your version of selfish is probably exactly where you should probably be. If you are used to putting other people first and you have a compassionate heart and a compassionate mind and genuinely want the best for other people, that will always manifest itself in your actions. Even in taking care of yourself, all you are doing is making sure that you have the energy you need to do what you need to do for yourself, to be the best version of yourself, which will affect others positively in turn. And those who truly love us, those who truly care about us and want to be there for us and want the best for us, will want us to be in that place and in that state too. There's nobody who truly cares about you who will see you depleted, empty, feeling like you have no one there for you and feeling like you always put others first, and won't want you to spend time working on yourself and pour back into yourself. anyone who truly cares about you will want you to do those things for yourself. So it's a case of communicating clearly if you're taking time for yourself and putting yourself at the forefront of something, and then letting those who truly care about you make themselves clear. If you find yourself genuinely just taking care of yourself, and perhaps you're not able to do as much for others as you're used to, anybody who takes real issue with that when it's not a personal thing and you're genuinely just taking care of yourself and doing what you need to for yourself is somebody who, I won't say doesn't care about you, but isn't showing the requisite level of care for you, because every relationship works two ways. Those you care for should care for you too. Pouring back into yourself doesn't make you selfish. It, in fact, makes you even better at being selfless, because you have the energy to do so. You have the time to do so. You have the wherewithal to do so. If we are to be the best we can to others, it helps us greatly to be the best versions of ourselves. And the only way to do that is to pour into ourselves. So it's not malicious to take care of yourself. It is actually the thing that we need to do if we're ever to take care of others properly. Question 6. My question is, have you ever struggled with masculinity/toxic masculinity, and any thoughts around the topic? And there was a follow-up to that question, which was, following on from the toxic masculinity question, how do you define masculinity? Has this definition changed with time and or phases of specific life events? Do you self-identify as masculine? Lots of questions essentially broken down to, what do I think of toxic masculinity? How is it affecting my life? Do I define myself as masculine? And how do I define masculinity and my masculinity? And how has that changed throughout my life? I am the most self-actualized I've ever been. This is the most actualized version of myself that I've ever been. I'm very confident and comfortable in who I am. Masculinity, the world has changed around me as I've grown up. I've always grown up as a cisgendered heterosexual man. That's always been my identity. And what's been expected of me and allowed of me by society and in my own head and by myself has changed since I was young. Then I was a teenager, a young adult. I'd say I'm in my late 20s now. I'm sure things will continue to change as I get older. My overarching view on things is this. Toxic masculinity is leaning into the harmful ideals set by our society, which has been traditionally patriarchal, which provides men with a lot of power and not necessarily the emotional tools to handle that power, and not enough information on how that power and level of privilege affects others through their actions. There is a constant process of learning what masculinity means, what masculinity should be, how we as men, simply by existing, and our society structures affect other people. Constant process of learning. One of the biggest duties I feel as a man is to constantly be listening to and understanding and hearing about experiences that I haven't lived. And it's work that you constantly have to do because, as I said, our society is traditionally patriarchal. So unfortunately, unless you actively seek out this information continuously, it's things that could just escape you. There are things and experiences and problems that you could never know about as a man, as in like they can never come to you. You could go your whole life without thinking about them if you're not listening to other people. We as human beings all have a duty to listen to each other and listen to other people's experiences, the experiences of people who you aren't like, so you won't experience life the way they have to experience it. One of my favorite voices on these things, by the way, is Jordan Stevens. Stevens spelled Stephens. He has a lot of fantastic work. He has a really great book. He has a podcast of his own, really fantastic. He's one of the voices I respect most on topics of masculinity, especially in today's age where young men, specifically, there are certain really dangerous pipelines that young men can go down, which are harmful to them and to others. As I said, very deep topic, one I can't really address fully in the context of this Q&A episode, but ultimately, it's my duty to be a good person. To me, being a good person means compassionate, understanding, caring, and providing for those around me as a man. and the way society is set up. I understand my privileges and my positions, and I'm working to continually understand those things. I am working to continually hear the lived experiences of those who live different lives to me, and constantly willing and open and wanting to live my life in a way where I can provide for, be there for, advocate for change for others, and lead by example myself in terms of the things that traditionally men have needed but haven't had. Things like talking about your emotions, being openly emotional, which are things that men need because every human being is emotional. Traditionally, when we go to toxic masculinity, traditionally men aren't supposed to show emotion, which I've always found very funny, because if a man is angry, then it's fine. But anger is an emotion, just like anything else. And anger usually comes from a deeper emotion, which needs addressing more than the anger itself. One of the things I do, one of the reasons I do this, is because I believe that kind of the toxic masculinity narrative around emotions and not being soft, or what's described as soft, which truly is just compassion and caring, which is something we should all have, those views should be very much challenged, because it does nobody any favors, not us and not the people our actions affect. That was a little bit long-winded. I hope it made sense. But ultimately, I want to be as good a person as I can. I want to affect people as positively as I can. And to do that, it's a constant learning process of what masculinity is and should look like. I feel like I've got a decent idea, but that idea will continue to change as I continue to learn and grow. Hi, David. You said you were an avid reader. Do you have any recommendations? I love the way you speak, by the way. You always sound so eloquent, and I can't help but think it might be because of the books you read. I think the you are what you eat mentality applies to the materials you read/consume as well. So I'd really like to read what you're reading too. I'm in the process of writing my first book, so any advice on that would be appreciated as well. Thank you. Firstly, all the best with the writing of your book. I'm sure you love writing, which is why you're doing it in the first place. Remember that you love it. Remember why you love it as you go through the more arduous parts of the process. I did an episode on writing my book. I can't remember what episode specifically it was, but it's in the 40s. I did an episode on writing the book. So in terms of advice and thoughts on that, that episode would be for you. On the broader question of what I'm reading, I tend to, or have in the last couple of years, done a reading list at the beginning of every year that I would post on Instagram, which I didn't do this year. But what I'll do is in the description of this video, I'll link my last reading list, because it had the books I enjoyed from 2023 and the books I was going to read in 2024, which I did read and enjoyed. There wasn't a single book on that list, actually, that I didn't end up enjoying. So I will share that in the caption of this video. So there's there for anyone else as well who wants recommendations on the kind of things I read. My reading pattern does tend to be every month I'll try to read a book, a fiction book, a non-fiction book, and a book I read or would have read as a child. That pattern keeps me in a regular flow of reading. And I think there's something to appreciate from every book, especially when it comes to books that I read or would have read when I was a child. The amazing thing about young adult and children's fiction is that quite often very complex ideas have to be broken down into a level that children can understand. And as adults, we tend to think of everything on the most complicated scale. But sometimes to read those same principles broken down to a child's understanding helps me see how I'm overthinking a lot of things and overthinking a lot of situations. Seeing big ideas in their simplest forms is really positive for my thinking. So that's something I highly recommend as well. It also really helped me get my love back for reading things that I have already enjoyed. Rereading books is a great thing to do. There's a reason that, our ancestors used to tell the same stories over and over again that are passed down to us, because the same as watching your favorite shows again or watching your favorite films again, every time there's something new that you gain from it. So actually, I'd say rereading is a big part of improvement of vocabulary and thought, because every time you read something again, you feel and notice something new, depending on the place you are in life when you come across it again. So yeah. What do you tell yourself when things aren't going well close to a deadline? I love that you emphasize patience and slow change, but sometimes it feels like things are going poorly and I need to fix it now. There's an old proverb. The best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago. The second best time is now. You're right. Sometimes you need a change immediately, or you need something to change immediately. Changing something has a ripple effect of changing the wider situation. When it comes to when I need immediate change, Sometimes I'll do something where I'll give myself a time limit of however long I want to think about it, say 5 minutes. I'll put a 5-minute timer on and I'll list everything I'm worried about a situation that I'm struggling with. And then as soon as that timer goes off or is finished, I count down from 3 and stand up and do something towards what I need to do. Just literally 3, 2, 1, and short circuit my overthinking and going in cycles. There are so many things that I've done to try and be a disciplined person, because ultimately a lot of this does come down to doing what you know you need to do. When there's a deadline coming, when there's pressure on something, action, just action. I sit here and talk every week. We talk and we think. And the reason we do all of these things is to provide us with better tools with which to act. At a certain point, there are no more podcasts to listen to. There are no more books to read. There are no more videos to watch. You have the information you need. You must simply act. Whatever it takes to get you to act. Set yourself a timer. Count down from 3 and stand up. Do something now towards what it is you need to do. And don't forget, every time you've had a deadline before in your life, you've made it. And if you haven't made it, you sort out the situation afterwards. And even if those two things aren't true, everything can change from this next deadline right now. Something tells me that those first two things, one of those or both of those, will be true. But even if they're not, something can change now. So, action. We know sometimes when slow change is needed, but equally sometimes we know when we must act. And if you know you need to act, 3, 2, 1, now. How do you reconcile things like changing slowly and doing 75 hard? I feel like 75 hard embodies the concept of I need to see a change now, so I'm going to pressure myself into this challenge and it's all or nothing. Did you have the gradual change mindset then, or is this something you've learned since then? I did have the gradual change mindset when I did 75 hard. For context, 75 hard is a mental fitness challenge that I did almost 2 years ago now. It's episode 5 of this podcast, actually. I talk about it. So go and listen to that if you would like to. Feels weird because it was such a big deal when I did it, and now it's been quite a while since. Essentially, it's a mental toughness challenge that takes place for 75 days, and there are rules that you have to follow for those 75 days. And it might sound or seem like an immediate thing, but to me, it didn't really feel like it, because it's 2.5 solid months of doing the same thing. Pick anything that you want to be better at and do it every day for 2.5 months. And you realize that 1, it's not immediate. And 2, by the end of 75 days, you're in a substantially better place than you were on day 1. Me taking on 75 hard as well. In the episode, I kept emphasizing that it wasn't because I didn't think I was good enough. It wasn't because I thought I needed to change or be better or be different. It was a case of proving to myself something that I already knew. I just needed to consolidate that knowledge, which was I can do anything I tell myself to do. And me sticking to my word to myself is more important than anything, because I matter. I didn't tell anyone when I was doing 75 hard because I wanted it to be a case of I'm doing this for myself, by myself. Nobody's telling me to do it. Nobody's forcing me. Nobody's holding me accountable. I just said to myself that I would do it. And I value myself so highly that I will deliver on my word to myself. So I did have that mindset of gradual change back then as well. My reasons for doing 75 hard weren't because I needed to change immediately. It was a case of consolidating an internal voice that wasn't quite loud enough, but is much louder now than it was then, which is nice. Thank you for this video, David. My question for the Q&A is, do you have a book recommendation for us besides your own, of course? My own is my book, Frequently Happy, which I do highly recommend. It's nice to be able to recommend it with reviews now, because many people have read it. And almost every day, actually pretty much every day, I'll get someone reaching out telling me how much they're enjoying the book, which is really lovely, super humbling, and exactly what I'd hoped for. So really wonderful. So my book, Frequently Happy, I of course recommend. In terms of books to read generally, again, I'll have my reading list in the bio. And then in the next, maybe hopefully in the next month, I might post again on Instagram about generally my reading list. At the moment, what I'm currently reading, I'm reading a book called Blue Sisters by Coco Mellows, which is fantastic. I read a book called All the Colors of the Dark by Chris Whitaker last year, which is one of my became one of my all-time favorites as I read it. Hello Beautiful by Anne Napolitano, I read last year, absolutely gorgeous as well. those are all the books at the moment. I'm a bit short on nonfiction at the moment because when I was writing my book, and especially towards the tail end of the process of writing my book last year, reading nonfiction was affecting my writing flow too much. So I just stopped. So I'm going to get back into that this year. But in terms of fiction and books I've enjoyed recently, those three. That's all the questions we had. So I hope you enjoyed the Q&A. I'll see you again at episode 60 for another one. But until then, and before the next episode, my deepest thanks to you for everything. Without you, I wouldn't be talking. The process of doing this, I just love it so much. I enjoy it so much. And to me, it's a two-way process. It's me sharing and you listening and replying to me. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate your valuable time, being a small part of your ecosystem, hopefully being a friendly voice, an encouraging voice, and hopefully occupying a positive space in your life. It's a true honor, genuine privilege. I will continue to take it as the privilege it is and to give you my very best for as long as you want it. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening. Whatever you're doing this week, I hope you have a wonderful one.